Welcome, everybody, to the Backyard Professor Live Sunday night podcast / videos. I have a very fabulous guest on tonight, Tim Rathbone. He is the insider of the Mormon Historical Archives, just during and post Leonard Arrington years. So let's get this show on the road. We've got a lot of insider historians information to share with you tonight. Good stuff coming up. Okay, welcome back to the Backyard Professor live session. Tonight, we are going to get the skinny on a lot of ideas and on a lot of people. First, I have an announcement I want to make. I do have 2 new podcasts up on the backyardprofessor.org. If you'd be so kind as to push the recurring donate button. It does not have to be a large amount, just any amount you want, any amount you can is always helpful. And we so appreciate all of your support and love and appearing here while we make fools of ourselves, sharing wonderful knowledge with you. Tonight is going to be exceptionally interesting. We have it straight from the horse's mouth. I would like to introduce to you my friend and your friend, yes, from the chat live. Let's welcome Tim Rathbone. Bravo, bravo, Tim. Everyone's clapping, man. Hey, welcome to the show, man. Good to see you.
Thank you very much.
So are you hyped up for tonight?
Yeah. I'm waiting for a response to my question in the chat.
You're already talking to him on chat already? Holy Toledo, I'm missing out on the fun stuff. Okay, you got to leave the chat alone. Now you have to get to tell stories, right, my friend. So, okay, so the reason that we've got Tim on tonight is because, as you guys well know in the chat, and those of you who are new to the channel, welcome. We love having you. I want to say hi to everybody. Hey, Debbie Joe, John Ross Barsky, Doug Vincent, Patty Cake, fine business operator. Woo! I talked to him earlier this afternoon, a good man, Doug Vincent. Yeah. I noticed Dan Bogle's in the house, Gail Capson, all of you wonderful people, Tom Miller, Mark Crispin. Yeah, baby. We're working on a t-shirt with that, by the way, you guys. Coco B, welcome, my friend. Richard Petchak, good to see you. Boy, you're all showing up. We love it. We love seeing all of you. Flat Pat, hello, my friend. I just had him on last Thursday. Good to see you. So we're all here, and you guys are already filling up the chat, which is a wonderful thing. So, Tim, let's start this off. Let me ask you a question, just out of curiosity, just to get your intellectual vibes going, or your spiritual vibes. I'm not quite sure how to say this, but a question I think all of us are going to be, I mean, it's perpetually in our mind, and I'm wondering if you might have an insider insight to this. If not, no big deal, but I'm just curious, how can the leadership not see that by squelching the historians, by making it so difficult to get into the archives, couldn't they see that that was going to bite him in the butt? I mean, what was their, how was their interaction with you guys?
I never had any issues with the leaders, really.
Oh, you were keeping your nose clean and working really deep underground.
Well, I was able to see just about anything I asked for.
No kidding, really, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it became tighter. It became tighter during the late 80s and 90s. I haven't been back since 98 or 99, maybe 2000. So I don't know what it's like now. And they're in a new building, so I have no idea.
Okay. So they've technically moved the archives now to a new building.
That's what I understand.
As well. Okay. Interesting. Hey, what's your cat's name?
This is Angel.
Angel.
Yeah.
Welcome to the show. Be good. Don't scratch Dad.
I was driving down the road and somebody threw him out of the car. He was a little kitten, and I picked him up.
Oh, well.
He's the first cat I came to Bakersfield with. And I have 5 cats now. I have three have adopted me and 2 kittens.
You have a full house.
I have a full house.
I would like, first off, just to let's take a look at probably one of the most important people we want to talk about tonight. I'll put this picture up of Jay Bell. I'm not sure how many in the audience would know who he is. Tell us a little bit about Jay and how you know him and what you guys were doing in the archives for, helping the research along and all that jazz. Who is this gentleman?
Jay was Larry Porter's research assistant. And I met Jay around the same time the Clayton Journal thing happened.
This one?
That one. Scott Fallring, apparently Scott Fallring was a research assistant for somebody in the religion department. And from what I understand, he and Andy shared an office in the Joseph Smith building. And Scott saw it and went and made a copy of it, along with part of the Zebedee Coltrane diaries. And he gave copies out to a few people. And one ended up in Ernest Strack's grandpa's bookstore. Jay had one, I had one, Kent Walgreen had one. I think Gary Bajir and Ron Prudis got a copy.
So these are being shared behind the scenes.
Behind the scenes, yeah.
No kidding. So you guys are on a gold mine then.
Yeah, and I think Jay and I were in a class together with Dr. Flammer also. We became really good friends. I think he was in the World War II class with me. We became the World War II class.
Oh, okay.
Bill Flammer taught military history at BYU. He's one of my favorite professors. I think that we met there, and about that time when all that went down, we became friends. And Jay and I were friends up until his passing in December 2003.
And he was killed in an automobile accident?
Well, he got off the bus and he turned right he usually went left and would go around the front of the bus through the crosswalk to his apartment across the street. And for some reason, he turned right and went back and stepped into traffic.
Oh, man. So he was actually born blind in one eye, wasn't he?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he was legally blind.
Yes.
That's astonishing, because when I looked in his archives, and I didn't think of getting the address up here, this man collected everything load of stuff. I mean, the archives are amazing. He was quite the go-hung getter, and yet technically he was blind, except for those glasses helped him see out of his one eye.
Yep.
that was impressive, man. That was you told me to look into his archives, and he's got hundreds and hundreds of articles in that.
Yes.
So
Jay was a blogger, and if he knew about it, he'd find out about it and he'd get it. He would find it.
That's
we
fun.
We used to ride the bus to the archives together, or I'd drive when I drove up to Salt Lake. I'd take him with me when he wanted to go up there. So yeah, we did a lot. We used to go to movies together when my ex-wife didn't want to go. It was me and somebody else. We'd go to the movies together and stuff. Anyway.
How cool. How cool. So now, and a lot of this was the history materials, right?
Yes.
That you guys were making so many copies of and getting copies together, like the different diaries and journals and all of that information. So you guys actually, before anybody was actually able to publish much, you guys had the inside knowledge, so to speak. You knew what was going on with whoever's journal you had and diary than the authors did.
Yes.
So who was you a research assistant with?
Well, Dennis Rowley was head of the archives. After Scott quit the Religious Studies Center, he got hired by Dennis to be his microfilmer and his research assistant. And then Scott quit, and I found out that Scott quit, and I went right to the archives to talk to Dennis, and Dennis hired me as his research assistant.
Oh, and how long were you his research assistant?
About 3 years.
3 years, yeah. So now was he so the head archivist, he would basically, when documents were brought in, he would archive them, alphabetize them, whatever and all. And then you also had to know where they were in order to help him be the researcher to get those documents to someone who wanted them, right?
Right.
Yeah.
The documents would come in through the loading dock, and then they'd be taken. We had a room downstairs. We called it the dungeon, and it was a storage room. And then every stairwell in the library, there was a storage area under the stairwells. They were jam-packed to boxes. We didn't have enough room to store everything we had. And so those were unprocessed collections. And then we would take them upstairs and we'd process and we'd organize them and impose an order on the collection so that if somebody were researching it, they'd know where to go and to find what they were looking for.
So was a lot of the early pioneer journals and letters and all that, was that fairly popular then?
Yes.
Wasn't that during the Arrington years where he was wanting to tell more of the story of the common Mormon instead of all just the leaders and the apostles? And
that's right. That's right. Yes.
So I'd imagine you got a lot of eyes on insights into pioneers and their journey west, and Salt Lake City is an early city.
Well, one of the papers that I helped Dennis write was on the Wisconsin pineries and what was going on up there with the apostates from Nauvoo. They go up to Wisconsin and cut the trees they took down to Nauvoo to build the houses and all about the temple. And we did a lot of research on that. And I'd go to Salt Lake and find their diaries and stuff. What we didn't have at BYU, I'd either go to the church archives, U of U, or Utah Historical Society to see what they had there to find information. So I was traveling around quite a bit. My classes were Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Usually Tuesday and Thursday, if I took one, it would be a night class so that I could go up the archives those 2 days. And then sometimes Saturday, because U of U archives was open on Saturdays, if I remember right.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah. So, okay, now I've got to have a confession out of you. Did you actually see the historical record that showed that Brigham Young was selling tobacco in Salt Lake City and coffee?
That's beyond my period. My time frame was, my interest was more through the Exodus from 1830 to 47. So I didn't to that.
Interesting. Okay, so did Joseph Smith really drink that beer?
I guess so. Of
Hey,
course he did.
Debbie Joe says she knew Scott Farling. Scott Farling died in 2018, didn't he?
Yes.
He just recently passed. So
Yeah.
that was a loss to the Mormon history
Oh, it was a great loss.
department. Yeah.
And his papers are at the U of U also.
The newspapers.
No, his collection of papers is at the U of U.
Oh, it is at the U of U now. Okay, yeah. Good. Okay, so tell me about your ideas with Jan Ships. Did you ever meet Jan Ships?
I met Jan Ships a couple of times, and she sent me a copy of a paper she was working on back in 91 or 92 about the church, and I added to it. Oh, man. She said, I built the framework and you added the structure. And it's published in some journal somewhere. I don't remember. It's been so long. But we would email back and forth in the early days. And I met her at MHA in Sunstone.
MHA?
Mormon History Association in Sunstone. And we called her Mother Ships because she was like our mother. I really enjoyed her presence.
Yeah, she was the best Mormon historian as a non-Mormon there was.
There wasn't anybody better.
Well, that's fun. That's cool. So you got to know one of my early heroes, Todd Compton. Did you know him much?
I didn't know Todd that much well at BYU, but when he was working on his Sacred Loneliness book, I shared some things with him, and he shared some things with me.
That'd be this one, huh?
That one right there, yep.
Yep, Sacred Loneliness. One of the best books on polygamy, and interestingly enough, one of the, I should say, worse reviewed books, or at least harshly reviewed books on how not to talk about polygamy. And I can't hardly think of a better way than to talk about polygamy from the woman's point of view.
Exactly.
But it was some of the farms types, reviewers, quote, scholars who was reviewing this book, and they obviously didn't like it. Is that any surprise?
Todd gave me the manuscript on disc, and I went through and reviewed it and shared some ideas with him about changing.
Oh, how cool. How cool.
Yeah. And now with that thing Bill Real found last week about that woman, the G, I think was her name, that just adds to it.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, Bill's good with people like that.
Research, yeah.
So another couple of people that I wanted to ask you about and talk about is these gentlemen. Brigham Young House of Faith by Gary James Bergera and Ronald Pridis. How do you know them two?
Okay.
Tell us about them.
Knight Magnum Hall and the Social Hall are south of campus. And then across the street was Ernest Books, or Grandpa's Books, and upstairs with the 70s Press. And right next door was Kinko's Copies.
Right next to Grandpa's Books?
Right next to Grandpa's Books.
Perfect.
That's now a parking lot. They tore down Knight Magnum Hall. Oh. And it's a parking lot. I looked at it the other day on Google Earth. It's all gone. But yeah, Ernest was a polygamist, and me and Art.
Who was Ernest?
Ernest Strack.
And he's the one that owned Grandpa's bookstore.
He's the one that owned Grandpa's Books. It was a used bookstore, yeah. And he had these boxes of files that are now at the BYU archives of things, and the things we would copy, we'd share with Ernest so he could add to his collection of documents. And so I met Ron and Gary through the 70s Press and the Clayton Diary thing. When Andy went back and demanded we all give him back a copy, but everybody kept a copy We gave him the copy that Scott gave us, but we also made our own copy.
No kidding. He told you to give it back, huh?
Oh yeah, he demanded it. Yeah.
Uh-oh. Now, was he part of the archives group?
No.
So how did he catch wind you had it?
Scott told him who he gave. Scott had to tell him who he gave copies to. I don't know what he did to threaten Scott to do that, but he said, "Go get them and bring them all to me." So he went around to all of us, and we gave him. I'm giving you back the copy you gave me. We said, "Did you make a copy?" Don't ask me that question.
Don't answer that question. So you did make a copy.
Yeah.
Yeah, good for you. So these
right.
guys, Gary James Bergera and both these guys in Pritis, they were quite the scholars. This was quite an eye-opening book on BYU. It really described a lot of the politics, the tensions within the college from its founding to today. So
yeah.
So the real one that we want to talk about is your beloved friend, and I knew him through his books, but I met him once at Sunstone and got to shake his hand. He was kind of a quiet man, but this man right here, tell us what you know about him. Tell us some of your experiences with him.
I took History 100 from Mike.
Oh, you took a class?
I took 2 classes from Mike.
Oh, tell us about those. That would be interesting.
History 100 and American Social History. And when I took History 100, I went into Mike. We had a meeting, and I said, "I want to tell the truth about the church." I was so naive. And he said, "They don't want it." He told me basically they didn't want to know. You need to be careful. Just watch out. And I would say hi, and I talked to him and drop by. Even when I didn't have a class from Mike, if I found out he was in his office, I'd go knock on his door to talk to him. He pointed me in the direction of some places where to look. Mike and I kept up an email correspondence shortly before he passed. Mike was in the service during the Vietnam War, and I was volunteering here in town at a place that honors veterans, and they had a packet we sent out to Vietnam veterans, a declaration and some medal challenge coin and stuff. And I mailed that to him shortly before he passed. I don't know if he opened it or not, but you know, you get a feeling you need to do something, a prompting. And I just said, you know, I got to do this. And I did it. But Mike would call me. We talk on the phone a few times. Like I said, we emailed probably once a month for 20 plus years.
No kidding. So would you talk about the research, or was it more personal friendly? Or?
Both. I'd call it right and ask him a question, and he'd answer back, and he'd say, "Do you have a copy of this?" "Yeah, and I'll send it to you." Like I had a copy of the Nauvoo Temple record. I mailed that to him. The Book of Anointing and the Book of Sealings and Adoptions. I think I sent him those.
So you were giving him some really good stuff too.
Yeah, well, when I worked in the archives, and I would find something that was interesting, I would make a copy and I put it in an envelope and I'd slide it under his door. But when I always used to go home. I used to walk through the Knight Magnum building sometimes, especially when it was cold, and slide it under his door. And the next day I drop by. Did you get what I left you? Yeah, you know. So,
Huh.
Yeah, I have a great deal of respect for Mike. I really love the man.
Yeah, the church didn't do him any favors, did they?
No, and like I was telling you earlier, that asshole in Arizona who was a real estate magnate or something basically destroyed him. The church, he tried to get a job at Arizona and he tried to get a job at Claremont. And the church is despicable in the way that these rich assholes just stop people from getting jobs. I think he's the best historian we've had.
Blacklisted him, though.
Blacklisted.
I remember there were quite a few of the old farms scholars who were just cackling with glee over the fact that he could not get a job. And that was one of those things that I won't name names, but that was one of those things, and everybody knows who they are, and they know who they are too. They're still active online.
They're just assholes.
Yeah, that is one of the things that made me convinced I really don't want to be associated with these kind of people who mock and make fun of people that the church blacklists, and then they, of course, they mocked him about being gay, and they mocked him about his research and all, and yet none of them could touch him with a 10-foot pole. They couldn't possibly keep up with Quinn. I mean, if you've never read his Mormon Hierarchy, Origins of Power and Extensions of Power, that 3-inch thick book, half of it is footnotes and references. It's just staggering how much information this man could put together. And you knew him, and you kept on an email discussion with it.
He sent me a Christmas card every year, and I'd send him a Christmas card. So, he probably did it with Dan and Brent and others. I don't know, but I was just grateful of the friendship that we had for all those years.
Yeah, that is spectacular. Well, I'm honored to have you in my presence, even if it is through a computer, man.
Thank you.
And then, of course, this book. Did you ever read this one?
Yes, I did.
Tell me what you think about this. Did you have a hand in any of this stuff?
I did.
Tell us
I
about
did
that.
share some things with Mike. I can't remember everything, but
Well, no, tell us a few things.
it's been so long since I read it.
Did you ever read his second edition?
Most of it, I didn't get through it.
Yeah. There's a few other historians who say he shouldn't have wasted his time responding to Peterson and Midgley and Hamblin, because they were just polemicists anyway, and technically they were, but fun stuff, I suppose.
Yeah. I just, when that book came out, I was so happy to see it finally, and I'm credited in there, and Art's credited in, and Art de Hoyos is, ouch.
Art de Hoyos is also, I think he is, and you're credited properly so too. Now, Art de Hoyos, he's quite a historian himself. How do you know Art?
Well, we all met I think we met at Grandpa's Books, probably, and I just talked to Art yesterday.
How's he doing?
He's doing good. He's doing good. He's going to Puerto Rico next week. He's the archivist for the Masons back in Washington, D.C.
Yeah, he's in the Grand Masonry. He's a very, very important Mason. I'm going to see if I can get him on my show. That's about the best picture I got of him, and that makes him look fabulous.
We used to go up to Salt Lake. We visited the Tanners. We visited Ogden Kraut, some other polygamists up there. We used to go to the archives together.
So what did you think of Ogden Kraut? You actually met Ogden Kraut, huh?
I liked Ogden.
Did you? Yeah.
I did. I liked Ogden. I really liked Ogden when I met him.
Was he kind of scholarly, or was he personal? What kind of guy was he?
He was, how do I describe Ogden?
I guess that's a tough question somewhat.
That is tough. He shared so much with us. He just wanted people to know. He was very giving and wanted people to know. Well, look at all the books he wrote.
Yeah.
And the things that he wrote about the taboo type of stuff.
Yeah.
He just wanted people to know.
He was never quoted in general conference, that's for sure. So tell us more about Art de Hoyos and your escapades with him. What else did you do? Did you actually research historical materials in the archives when you guys were at BYU?
Yes. Yes. Art's the one who did the parchment, the Masonic part. Art figured out where the characters from the Book of Mormon, from the that manuscript with the characters on it.
Anthem manuscript?
Thank you. Art figured out where those characters came from. Art
where did you say they came from?
I don't remember right now, but
no kidding. Art figured out where they came from.
It's either the sixth book of Moses or the Magus or some other magic book is where the characters were found.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find my copy of Stan Larson's The Golden Plates. I just had it because it shows those characters. Wow, I did not know that.
He figured out where the stuff from the parchments came from. The Hiram Smith parchments came from the Magus.
So he tied it down to where some of the influence of, and Joseph Smith had access to the Magus.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, that's very important to know. There's Thomas Stewart Ferguson. Did you ever meet him?
I never met him.
You never met him? How about Stan Larson? He wrote this book, The Quest for
I did Stan from the archives.
Was he in there often?
I think he was the director there when I was there.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember right.
I heard through the years that he regretted writing this book. I don't know. I mean, he probably did get a lot of flack. When I was an apologist, I critiqued his use of Hugh Nibley. And now that I'm no longer an apologist and I can look back at it, I can see Larson's point a lot more clearly. So have you written any books?
Any books? No.
But you've written some articles.
I've written some articles.
I happen to have one. This is where I first learned of you, and it really surprised me because I didn't know who you were at the time, but I did not realize that John Welch authored materials with you. You did this Book of Mormon translation, how it was translated, with John Welch, and the Farms published it.
And guess who wrote most of it and whose name is last?
John Gee?
No.
You wrote most of that and he took your work. Now, was he your research? How did this come about? Did he ask you? Did you ask him? Tell us.
It was my last year at BYU. It was the summer of '86. And Robert Smith worked for Farms. And
Robert Smith.
Yes.
The Robert Smith, I know that name. He was a very serious scholar on the ancient materials, wasn't he?
Yes.
It wasn't he the one that helped Hugh Nibley with his Book of Abraham series? I think
I don't know.
Okay, anyway, sorry for interrupting you.
But I would see Bob in the archives and special collections all the time. We rented. I lived in the library pretty much when I wasn't in class or at home.
Well, yeah.
And I was out of it. I just ended my job with either Don Cannon and Bill Hartley, and I needed something for the summer. And he introduced me to Jack, and Jack said, I need to do this paper. I said, well, I'll help you with it. And so the summer of '86, we worked on that together. Yeah.
Yeah, that was the year that it was published. The translation of the Book of Mormon, basic historical information. So you did all the work, but he gets to publish it. Of course, his name is on it. So Well, good. So that tells me you were a good scholar. I met you a few years later online.
Right.
I can't remember where it was at, but I remember asking you. I said, "Wait a minute, Tim Rathbone, I know that name," and because I used your article when I was an apologist to defend the Book of Mormon, and when I asked you if you were him, you said, "Yeah, that's me," but I no longer believe that stuff, and I'm going, "Huh?" It was wow. It was quite an eye opener for me. So now here we are.
Here we are. Yeah.
Hey, we've got a question. Was Grandpa's books the main Mormon Underground Documents meeting spot?
Yes. Yes.
And
everything went through Ernest. Yes.
And that was Ernest Strack, right?
Ernest Strack. And somebody asked about if I knew about his demise. Yes, I saw Ernest a couple of months before he passed.
And he died relatively young, didn't he?
Relatively young. He could have lived, but he didn't want to go through the operation. It's really sad.
Really? Oh, yeah. Man.
He had a tumor on his carotid artery. It was out like this. And it was too close to the artery. He didn't want to risk it. So.
Okay.
I saw him at Mary's house. Probably when did 91 or 92 when he passed.
Okay, keep talking. You're blowing Doug Vincent's mind. This is a good thing. That's what we're looking for. Mind is blown, mission accomplished. Tell us more about who was it? Who else did I have here? Oh, yeah. This book, The Words of Joseph Smith. Now, this is Ehat.
Ehat and Cook.
And Cook, yes. Yeah. You knew Ehat?
I knew vaguely.
Uh-huh.
I didn't know Andy. Andy had graduated by the time he was in his final year of grad school when I got to BYU in September 81. I left in 86. And so he was just finishing up his master's thesis. I don't think I saw Andy until a couple of years later when he was visiting BYU. I may have seen him, didn't know who he was.
So this book, The Words of Joseph Smith, the BYU Religious Studies Center, this was one of those that I actually compared with Joseph Fielding Smith's The Teachings of Joseph Smith, and this was vastly superior. It was so much more inclusive. It just shocked me, and that's why I was so interested, because then I came across this one by Scott Fowling, and you knew Scott.
I knew Scott.
Did you help with this book? Do you remember?
I did share some things with Scott that I found.
Yeah. So did he give you credit in here?
I think so.
Keep telling us about Scott. I'm going to look and see if he gave you credit.
Scott was an interesting character. He was in the Air Force, and Scott was Dennis's research assistant and the microfilmer, and I took over that job when I got hired. And Scott walked a really fine line. Scott's probably the only historian that could deal with Dallin Oaks and that's radical.
Scott had to deal with Dallin Oaks?
Yeah, when he published that book.
This one?
Yes.
This one offended Dallin Oaks?
Well, it didn't offend him, but I don't remember the conversation exactly, but something like it came out and...
There it is, your name, Tim Rathbone. He does get credit. So,
and he talked to him about it. He was at a state conference, a leadership meeting, and he talked to him about it because Dallin knew that he had done it, and they talked a little bit about it. He said basically the truth needs to get out, and I now question that conversation, but and Scott was working on the Oliver Cowdery papers last time I saw him back in that'd be 99 or 2000, and but Scott was a funny guy. He was just fun to be with. He was from Buffalo, New York, and it was just a joy to be with Scott sometimes. the things we were talking about.
Yeah.
We didn't just talk about Mormonism. We talked about other stuff.
But
when Jay just got a cell phone, and I think it was in '96 when I gave my paper at MHA on Brigham Young, that we went to Scott's house and we were standing outside his door, and Jay called him up, says, "Hey, can we come over?" And Scott said, "Yeah, okay, we'll be over in about 5 minutes." And we rang the doorbell, and he comes in. Yeah.
Fun to have good friends like that.
Fun to have good friends like that.
Yeah, that is cool.
Okay, Dan. Yeah.
There's another guy here that really is a prominence in Mormon history, and that would be this gentleman right here. How do you know
Jessee?
Jessee? Yeah. Tell us about your experience with him.
I really like Dean. I took a manuscript class from him. I edited the David W. Patton diary with footnotes and stuff. And Dean, can't remember the name of the class, something about manuscripts and history. And he talked to me, he told us about, during the Joseph Smith papers, he told us about the problems with the Thomas Jefferson papers, because there were issues with the first editions of that, how they made things not so stark. They weren't telling basically the truth. And Dean said, "I want to tell the truth about Joseph Smith." And started the papers project.
Really?
Yeah.
That's huge too.
And Dean had a copy of Woodward's thesis on the Doctrine and Covenants. It's a 3-volume work.
Yeah.
And he had a copy of LeGrand's copy on Mormonism in Missouri. And I wanted to make, I wanted a copy of it. I didn't want a copy of the hard copies in the library. So Dean just handed me this stack. He says, "Here, go make copies." So I went down to Kinko's and made copies.
The whole stack?
Yeah, the whole stack. There were 3 volumes, and then I can't remember the guy who did the Missouri thing.
So did he have flack with the brethren about telling the truth of Joseph Smith, Dean Jessee?
Yes, because they did the first volume, personal writings, and then they did the first volume of the diary and the second volume of the diary, but they wouldn't let him do the 3rd volume because it talked about polygamy.
Interesting.
And wives. And that's when it stopped. It was like in the middle 80s or 90s. There wasn't anything until they started the Papers Project a few years ago.
Well, there was Dan Vogel.
Right. I'm talking about
from the church. Yeah.
From the church.
Yeah. Vogel gloriously scooped him and showed him what nincompoops they were being by not doing this. So,
right.
Now, Flat Pat has a very important question that I know you're about. Did Tim have any run-ins with Mark Hofmann?
Yes. Mark tried to sell me a document.
Oh, tell us what happened.
Well, when I was doing research on David W. Patton, he tried to sell me a copy of an elder's license that he supposedly had signed. And then when I was doing my paper on Section 76, he told Lynn Jacobs that in Brigham Young's desk that's in the archives or somewhere, that there was a copy of the Revelation in one of his desks in a drawer that had got stuck or something. I can't remember exactly. Yeah, and I met Mark a couple of times, and I did not get a good feeling from the guy. I wasn't that impressed with him, quite honestly. I was at Grandpa's. I was at Ernest once when he showed up, and Art and I were there, and we both said there's something wrong with this guy.
No.
And I remember talking to David Whitaker about it also. This isn't possible that this guy could be finding this much stuff this fast. And
yeah.
yeah.
Same feeling that that Gerald Tanner had when
Right.
he isn't it fascinating? This is David Whitaker, by the way. We'll talk a little bit more about him, but we're on this Mark Hofmann thing. Mark Hofmann, what was I going to say? I was just in the middle of a thought. Yeah, I'm echoing in your deal.
I didn't hear that.
Is the audio working?
Oh, it's cutting out. You're frozen.
I'm frozen right now.
I can say you're okay now.
Okay.
Now ask.
So Mark Hofmann was questioned by a lot of you historian researchers.
Yes.
Underground about what was going on. And yet, crazily enough, Dean Jessee in the Salamander letter said it was Joseph Smith's handwriting, but he was wrong.
Joseph Martin Harris's. But you got to remember that the handwriting that he was comparing it to was also Hofmann's. So I went to them. Okay, I was at my parents. My parents lived in Colorado Springs, and I was there. We went there for some reason in, I think it was May. MHA had their meeting back in Missouri, and I caught the plane in Denver. I flew up to Denver, got on the plane. I walk in, and here's the Tanners, there's Mike Marquardt, here's all these Mormon historians. I knew a lot of them, you know. And Gerald handed me a copy of his thing, of his pamphlet, his tract, and he says, "You need to read this." And I read it, and I said, "This is interesting." So all the way on that flight, I can't remember who I was sitting next to, but we talked. That was a big discussion on the plane, that flying to Missouri. Had a window seat. Yeah, I remember that. And when we got there and Dean did his presentation, I think 3 of the 4 signatures were Hofmann forgeries.
Oh, wow.
And only 1 was original, if I remember right.
He was sneaky.
He was very sneaky.
Yeah, he'd done a lot of practice, according to the books. So, and you were asking me if I had one of those books.
Salamander.
The Salamander. Did you help with that book at all?
Yeah, I did. My cousin Sheldon Greaves was in ancient studies, and I was in the ancient studies room one time, and I think it was Don Perry or somebody had a bunch of Xerox copies of Hypocephali, and there was one that looked just like the one in the Pearl of Great Price. And Nibley comes in and he looks at it and he says, "That's the one the church has." It wasn't, of course, but we thought, "Oh, so the church has it?" He says, "I think so." And
number 2?
Yeah, number 2.
Whoa.
But it wasn't it. It was one similar to it.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I made copies of those. And a few months later, maybe a couple of years later, don't remember. It's been too long ago. But
all good.
What were we talking? Remind me.
So Nibley came in, thought it was the original.
Thought it was the original. Yeah.
But that doesn't exist. We still know that.
Yeah. Right. It doesn't exist. But I found letters in the archives written by the family that even before 68, that they knew that the papyrus still existed in the museum, and they put David Hiram in a mental institution because they were afraid he was going to take over the church. This is the Utah church had then put him in an institution to stop him from taking over the church.
How interesting.
Yeah, those letters are they're in the church archives somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did Hofmann ever go to the archives? Did you ever meet Hofmann there?
I saw him once at the church archives, a couple of times at Grandpa's. Yeah, he and Lynn came to the archives once to talk to David
Whitaker,
yeah. And then he was in Missouri, back in Missouri. He was there. He and Lynn were there. And then I saw him a couple of times at Sunstone. But like I said, I wasn't very impressed with the man. And when he called me up to try to sell me a document, I laughed. I said, I'm a poor student. And then this thing ends up in the archives a few weeks later, and they made a copy. Brother Kimball made a copy of it for me and gave it to me. And I says, how much did you pay for this? He says, I can't tell you. I know where it came from because he tried to sell it to me a few weeks ago. And he says, oh, we just got it.
Oh, how is
Pat Marsh? I can't remember.
So I want to go back to this in a way. I want to go back to Oakes being upset with Fowling, or at least concerned. Did Boyd K. Packer express any reservations?
I don't know about Boyd, but there was something about him and Oakes at a state conference that Oakes basically said, we need to tell the truth. We need to let it out. Because Scott was afraid that it would just came out like a week or two before, and he already had a copy and he knew about it. And it was kind of like a backhanded thing. He complimented him. He said, we need to tell the truth, but we need to be careful about it. I don't remember the exact comment, but it was something like that.
So that was obviously before Boyd came out with the mantle is far, far greater.
No, after. This is after.
Oh,
yeah, that wasn't published till when was that? When was that published?
Oh man, it was
in copyright. Look at the copyright in there.
Oh, the book?
Yeah.
It was 1989.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Signature, 1989.
Because Mantle was
1987.
Okay, because Mantle was August 81, right before I got to BYU. You gave that talk. Yeah.
Interesting. So you told me once, and I wanna just see if this is a story worth. I don't want to get you in trouble with him, but you told me once that you met Boyd in the archive.
No, I didn't meet him. I only saw him.
Oh, okay, you saw him.
I saw him. He and somebody else came up to the archives to talk to David Whitaker. David thought he was going to get fired, and what they wanted to talk about was security in the archives.
Oh,
because church archives was worried about their security, and they actually redesigned the whole archives. It used to be a big room with microfilm readers and tables that you could look at documents on.
Mm-hmm.
And then they redesigned it, and they designed the search room with glass. All the offices were glass walls. I remember Savage. So they could see, but I mean, even the employees. And so they'd stick up these big maps and posters on their walls so you couldn't see what they were doing. But they made the whole thing. It was crazy.
How
I know they didn't like it. I can't remember some of the people's names. Savage was the photo archivists. And anyway.
So were you able to convert there on the premise the microfiche 2 copy? The microfilm copy, or it just stayed as microfilm?
Stayed as microfilm. No.
How fascinating. So you knew
I took a class from Hugh.
Really? Which one?
Pearl of Great Price.
Oh, I've got that copy of the transcripts. I bought that from Farms. Really? Tell us about that. Tell us what you thought about all that.
Well, Nibley always, it seems like Nibley just was one conscious thought talking about things. He was talking in that class. We didn't talk at all really about the Pearl of Great Price. He talked about temples and sacred spaces and things like that. And then he wrote on this board, and it was a statement about the Book of Mormon, but he applied it to the Pearl of Great Price. That's a Farrago. I can't remember the exact quote. It's in one of the books. And we had to write a paper. And so I took the statement that he wrote up there. And I said, first of all, it wasn't about the Pearl of Great Price. It was about the Book of Mormon. And I defined what each thing that they say in the statement was. And he gave me a D on the paper, and he said, I'm a really good car salesman.
He gave you a D?
A C or a D, I can't remember.
I have never heard of Nibley doing that.
I think you got a C. I think it's the only class I got a C in.
Oh, a snot-nosed student refused the professor. You should have known better. Oh, wow. How interesting. Oh, that's amazing. That's fun.
It was fun. Every time when I talked to him, it was just like the stream of consciousness that he always had this thing on his mind. And his daughter was in our ward, and I talked to her about it. Rebecca.
Hey, back up a little. You're breaking up a little. I don't know what's wrong with the audio. Sorry.
That's okay.
There you go. That's better.
Anyway, maybe it wasn't. Anyway, his daughter was in our ward, and I talked to her about her dad and stuff. I wanted to ask him about his World War II and what he did, and he didn't answer that. So
he wouldn't tell you about his World War II experience?
No. There was a rumor I heard, and I wanted to ask him about it. I said, did you really do this? And he just wanted to talk about ancient stuff. So.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Hey, we've got another question for you. How did Tim's shelf break?
How did my shelf break? I don't think I ever had a shelf to break. Well, I was always curious about how things worked. And my father used to get upset at me for the questions I would ask. I'd say it started to crack and break when I was at the Y, and I wanted to become a church historian.
You're breaking up again. I don't know what's wrong with the audio. I can't control it here.
Can you hear me now?
Hold on, just one sec. Okay, now try it.
Okay.
A little, yeah. You're a little closer. Okay, start talking.
So, I think it was when I wanted to become a church historian to tell the truth about the church, and when Mike and I had that conversation. And then I realized it was just a big business, and they really didn't want the truth out there. And that's when I pretty much made the decision that I was going to copy things and share them, because it needs to be out there. I'm a believer in spreading truth, and I don't believe in censorship. And people need to know how things work and what's really going on. Like, I could never figure out why the church wouldn't let people see certain temple records, and I found it because of polygamy and pardon, and things like that. It was a slow process. But
sit back a little.
Okay.
I don't know why your mic is so goofy. Or unless it's just me.
That's in the chat. You hear me? Somebody
Yeah,
in the chat.
I can hear you, but it's breaking up a little bit.
Huh.
It's lagging. Yeah, audio is breaking up, but it's still okay on my end, Richard says.
Okay. So it was a gradual process.
Yeah.
And then when I was in leadership positions and they kept pushing things.
Like what?
Well, home teaching.
Oh, well, of course.
Still at the end of every month, I think have I done my home teaching all these years later. Yeah. And when they didn't care, when people didn't, as much as they say they cared, they didn't care and they didn't help out.
Yeah.
Like when I was going through my tough times, they didn't reach out. You know, all the stuff I had done in reaching out to people when I was going through tough times, they dropped me and ignored me like a hot potato. So,
yeah.
Okay.
In a way, my story is similar to yours, but so you don't. Yeah, this theme of truth is pretty important in history, and unfortunately, so many of the church leaders mistrusted the historians, Mark E. Peterson and Packer, and I guess later on Oakes did. At first, he was probably trying to. Sounds to me like he was trying to get the information out there, but carefully. So,
Well, he wrote that book with Marv Hill about the
Carthage conspiracy.
Yeah, and it was pretty honest and forthright. And I don't understand. Well, the reason he changed was he got in power and he realized how much, I think, bullshit it is. And he just is on his one horse theme right now about the gays and etc. Yeah.
You know, that's what happens, unfortunately. All right. So we've talked about, tell us a little bit more about Marvin Hill. He was a heck of a historian. He did a review on Fawn Brody, and it was a much more credible review than you Nibley. No, ma'am, that's not history. But tell us what you know about Marvin.
I didn't take any classes from Marv, but Marv and Jim Allen knew my parents back in Washington, D.C. after the war. And yeah, and when I talked to Marv, I wanted Marv to tell me stories about my dad that my dad never told me. And then when I'd see my dad, I'd ask him, do you remember this? Do you remember that? He says, where did you hear that? I said, Marv told me. So that was mostly my relationship with Marv. I would go to Marv and ask him things. Okay. I remember I was working on a paper once and he says, so what? What is it? What's the importance of it? He says, what do you mean? It's important to me. That's all that counts then, he said. So, yeah. But Marv had this great card catalog. He had these cards with these diary entries and stuff on it. He showed it to me, let me go through it one time to look for stuff. And, yeah. But I guess he was very mean and curt with some people. Some people say, you know, but I kind of like the guy.
Interesting.
Yeah.
His sister Dawn wrote the
Yep.
Joseph Smith, the First Mormon.
But did she really write it?
I don't know. You tell me.
I don't know. That's always been my question. I really wonder if he was the ghostwriter when I read it. But I don't know.
Interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So I've got. Can't believe Nibley gave you a D. Don, I can't believe Hugh Nibley gave you a D. I've never heard of that before. Of course, and you did refute him. Shame on you.
Yeah. I was having fun.
Yeah. So what about Don Cannon? What do you remember about him?
I was his research assistant for a while.
Oh, that's right. That's right.
Him and Bill Hartley. I think it was at the same time. and Don did not want to deal with anything controversial.
Oh,
But he was in the religion department, so he would give me assignments to look up things like he wanted to know if the cable, the Atlantic cable, when the Atlantic cable was laid, so the United States and England could converse by telegraph. I found that out for him. He just wanted. I basically was a fact checker for him, and
okay. Well, that's important too, though.
yeah, very important.
That teaches you a lot of other areas besides the Mormon stuff. So, oh, that's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
And then Bill Hartley, you've mentioned him. He
basically what I did with Bill is compile a bibliography of, I think it was diaries and letters, or anyway, things that were not in Bitten's Mormon Guide to Diaries and Letters, stuff that they had missed. He wanted me to compile a bibliography or a list of things that weren't in there that had been found out since that was published. So that's basically what I did for Bill. And Bill wrote a book about Denmark. Some people are idiots. I did Denmark. Denmark is flat. And he wrote a book. He described like the fjords and high mountains like Norway and Sweden and Finland have. And I said to Bill, I said, no. I said, the highest point in Denmark is in almost Exporting, it's like 500 feet above the ocean. There's nothing like that there. And we didn't cut it out. I really didn't know what to say. You gotta, have you ever looked at the map? You know where this is? It was all about writing things to make money, basically.
Oh. Yeah.
So basically,
they're saying they can't understand what you're saying. Can you lean back, lean forward? Your sound is breaking up. I don't know why. Go close to the mic.
Closer or further away.
I can't understand you now either. Darn it.
What about now?
I'm echoing. Is that you? You hear me echoing?
Yes.
I hear an echo somewhere. I'm not quite sure how to adjust that. Did that help? No?
I can't tell.
Okay, try talking now for a minute. Let's see if you can.
Can you hear me now?
Well, I can hear you, but it's real jumpy. I'm
Huh.
not quite sure why it's jumpy. Huh. That's odd.
Anything?
Yeah, it's really bad sound now. I can't even hear me. Or I'm jumping. Hold on, I'm going to mute me.
What about now?
I don't know. Okay. Turn off his audio, or at least down. Turn your audio down.
I don't know how to do that.
Did you turn it down?
I didn't do anything.
Hold on, I might be getting text to help us.
I didn't go to settings.
I've never had this happen on StreamYard before. Nope. Okay. Yeah, I'm echoing like crazy too. Mine's broke up. I don't know what to think. Okay, I'll try to talk from back here. Boy, that doesn't help. What if I talk here? Man, I don't know what to do. I can't understand myself at all. I can hear my voice.
You're breaking up.
Yeah, you're breaking bad. Doggone it.
Technical difficulties.
Yeah, I can't understand you at all. I can hear your voice, but I can't understand. I can't even understand me.
You're breaking up.
Let's be silent for 20 seconds to see if it'll clear up.
What was that?
Oh, I'm told I'm not bad. Have you disconnect and reconnect? Hold on. Okay, can you guys hear me now? I've silenced Tim for a second. Yeah, let's just do sign language. Okay, are you back?
No, I'm front. I'm front.
Ask him to log off and log back on. Can you log off? I'll have to send you another invite, I think.
Yeah.
Let's do that. Let me hurry up and kick you off, then I'll send an invite. Yep, there it is. Okay, hang on, you guys. I'm sending him an invite right now. And we shall get to this, hopefully. I've never had this experience before. Okay. It went out to him. We shall see him back here shortly, I hope. I'm going to take off some of these posts real quick. I am learning a lot from him. He had a lot of interesting historical information from a lot of different people. Oh, there he is right there. Okay.
Is this better?
Keep talking.
Is it better?
Not for me, no. And I still can't hear me either. That's crazy. Oh, it sounds perfect, Doug says.
Okay.
Okay, so keep talking. Okay, he is close. You keep telling the story that you were just telling. Retell it.
What was it telling?
I don't know. We were talking about Bill Hartley. Tell us about Richard Lloyd Anderson.
Richard was in my state presidency.
He was your state president?
Oh, he was in the presidency.
He was in the presidency.
I just challenged Richard on things.
We're breaking up still. God on it, Tim. I don't know what to do. Settings. Hold on, let me check my settings real quick.
Just fine.
Default MacBook Pro. That's good. I've got the echo cancellation. I'm going to turn down my volume a little. See if that'll help.
Maybe I should turn mine down.
Yeah, turn your mic down. Is there a cord not plugged in all the way? Terrible auto, great info. Thank you, David Harrington. Looks like Bigfoot is back. I can at least understand. Yeah, but we want it better than that. I'm echoing. I can't hear mine clear at all. Did you turn your volume down?
I did.
I'll be darned.
Let me turn it on and off again.
Audio avatars. I don't care about that. Audio. I turned my audio down a little bit more so it doesn't automatically adjust mic.
Should I turn off automatically adjust? Okay, how about that?
No, you're still. Can you hear me at all?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yeah, but yeah, it's the SCMC troopers, all the Christians and so. No, it's all broken up now. It's really bad. One of you try to use the other speaks. Okay, I'm going to try to mute me and you start talking.
Okay. I'm trying. SCMC traced me for 10 years on the internet.
They are saying definitely your audio.
Yeah.
Huh? Now they said it's your audio. I'm not quite sure. Hold it. Edit mic settings. Let me see. Echo cancellation. Is your phone on?
Yes.
Well, your phone has to be on, doesn't it?
Yeah, you can see me.
Man, Dan Vogel says you use earphones. My canceling is not off. Hold on, Dan Vogel's calling me. Hey, Dan. Huh? So what's going on? Dan said, quit using your phone, but does that cut you off from the video?
Well, I'm using Arium webcam, so it goes to my phone, but this sound comes out my computer.
So you can't unplug your mic and plug it into another port, can you?
No, because
Huh. That is crazy. Echo probably sound canceling is off. It's not. Dan Vogel. Is your echo off?
yes.
So is mine. Hold on. Well, wait a minute. Echo cancellation. Okay, say something.
Something.
Your sound is clear to me, but keep talking.
Okay.
Keep talking.
All right. We'll talk about the SCMC.
Yes.
I knew it as the Strengthening the Members Committee. And Gene England was my bishop, and he told me about it back in 83 or 84. Maybe it was later, before he went public about it. So there was something.
Is your phone volume down?
Well, the volume's coming out of my computer.
I know, but turn the phone volume all the way down.
I think it. What about now?
I think it sounds better. I'm echoing. What you did, his audio is fine now.
Okay.
Okay, so you can tell us.
So he told me about it. He suspected that there was something going on when he did his paper, the one he gave about the church. The gospel is true, but the church isn't, or something like. I can't remember. He gave it at Sunstone back in 85 or 86. And he suspected that something was going on when somebody talked to him.
Okay.
Anyway, my experience was back in 1990, when the internet was new, I got on the Genie bulletin boards, and I was sharing information. All those he had.
Wow. Hold it, Tim. I can't. You're completely muted. You did something really interesting. Now I can't hear you at all. And what is that? Looking for the phone. It's looking for the phone, if you can hear me, Tim. I've never had this experience before. Okay, I'm going to kick you off and then invite you back. I better call him. Can you guys still hear me fine? Lost sound completely. Can you guys still hear me fine? Let me know. Restart the podcast. Yeah, I'm tempted to. Okay, you can hear me. Hang on. Let me call Tim back real quick. Sorry about this. Fun technical difficulties, huh? Okay, let's see. Oh, come on. Okay, I will. Yeah. Yeah. What I'm going to do is see, I'm even echoing through my phone. Do you have to do this through your phone? Here you are. Okay.
Am I back?
I'm going to shut my.
Okay. How's that?
Oh, better.
Okay, good. Good. All right.
Okay.
So
I'm echoing. You talk.
So I was sharing a lot of information on Jeannie. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It was back in 91 or 92. And I was sharing a lot of information, historical stuff and scriptural stuff. And my mother went to BYU during World War II. She was in a Mennonite hall, the same hall I learned German in the LTM. And back then, the girls lived upstairs and the guys lived down below. They were co-ed back in the 40s, guys. And she knew Reed Benson and Thomas Monson and a few others when they were kids, right? And my mother used to talk about Monson as if he was family, even though she knew him. And so I mentioned something about Monson in one of these chats. I was having somebody, my mom knew him during the war, blah, blah, blah. So I was ward clerk and I go to church that Sunday and my bishop, Jim Steer, he says, I need to talk to you. And I said, what did I do now? He says, I got a phone call. The stake president got a phone call and I got a phone call from church saying that you mentioned something about Monson, that your mother knew him back at BYU and stuff. And I says, yeah, she talks about him all the time. They were good friends back then. And he says, well, you need to be careful about what you say on the internet. I said, all right. So I figured from that time on, all through my Jeannie years and then all through AOL, that they were watching me about what I was doing online.
Wow.
And then finally in May of 2001, they excommunicated me for what I was saying online. So they tracked me for 10 years, guys, and gathered all this evidence. And from what my friend, my old bishop who was on the high council when it happened, told me, I said, I asked him point blank, I said, did it come down from above? And he says, yeah. I said, was it Packer? And he says, I can't say anything, but
it was
pretty sure it was Packer who gave the order to get me out. So, yeah. So that's my experience with the strengthening the members committee.
Well, if there's I love you guys.
This is for them.
Now Tim, this is a meeting for yeah. Pat says that doesn't 41. Man, that's crazy.
Yeah.
No kidding. Thomas talking about rumor. Well, the homes obviously can't do that, so they have to have eyes.
Of course, there are spies everywhere. Yeah. So that was my experience.
I'm looking to see if I can do subtitles. I don't think I can. They were asking. They're saying I'm no.
Yeah, you're echoing a little bit.
Okay, keep talking. More stories.
Let me see. What else can I tell you?
It is on.
What's on?
My echoes. It is on.
Mine's off.
No, turn yours on. We want to count.
Okay, it's on now.
Okay, is that better? No, I can't hear myself at all. That's okay. We're not here to hear me. We're here to hear you. Tell us.
What about now? What about now? How's it now? What
This
do they
is
say?
what PYP would sound like if I was on mushrooms right now.
Okay,
I love my audience, man. Okay, keep talking, Tim. Tell us more of your stories.
um
What's a fun one? What was fun you did with Arturo de Hoyos? Did you go shooting guns?
I never did that with Art.
I know he
I
loves
did with
guns.
some other friends. No, I know he loves that stuff. No, we didn't do that. We visited the Tanners a few times.
How did that go? What did you talk about?
I just talked to Sandra about stuff.
She's easy to talk to, isn't she?
She's really easy to talk to.
Yeah.
We talked about the Adam God thing. And,
here's a question for you. Go ahead and answer that since I'm echoing.
What's the most secret thing I saw while I was there? Probably those letters about putting David Hiram in the mental institution, because they're supposed to be sealed till 2025 or something like that. The copy that BYU Archives had, there was a letter saying they were supposed to be sealed to the 2020s, but the church archives, you can go there and read them there. So that was the most wild thing that I think we
David
found.
Hiram was in a mental institution?
I think it was David Hiram. I'm trying to remember who, but basically the church told the reorganize, because they thought he was going to take over the church. Yeah, I think it was David Hiram.
Interesting.
And they institutionalized him to keep him from taking over the church.
Okay, Richard Petchak says, tell me a Daniel Peterson story.
Oh, God.
Tell several of them. Come on.
I don't know many. I didn't interact with Dan that much. I've interacted more with him on the internet than I have in person.
Well, tell us about that.
He and Ron Pritis were in the Swiss mission together. I think Dan was in the LTM when I know Ron was, so Dan might have been in the LTM when I was there. I would cut Dan down on a lot of things that he used to talk about on Mormon L.
Like?
It's been too long.
The name Alma?
That was one of them.
Nahum?
I don't remember that.
Okay, what else? Are you frozen? Oh, no.
No, I'm not frozen. I'm thinking. I really didn't have that much interaction with Dan.
Which apologist did you interact with the most?
Name some.
Lou Midgley.
I only met Lou I met Lou at Sunstone.
You did not. He hated Sunstone.
He used to go.
No.
Yes.
Midgley?
Yes. Yes.
Blow my buttons off.
Yes.
He is such a righteous judgmental against Sunstone. Wow. He must have had a shift break and too scared to say so.
This is back in the 80s.
Wow.
I didn't really interact with him. Oh, Novak. Somebody Novak.
Gary Novak.
Thank you. Yes, Gary and I interacted a lot.
Okay,
I don't remember the stories, but
for Pete's sake.
I said, have you considered this or that? The other point of view with Gary.
Novak was like a Daniel Peterson Jr. in the Farms Reviews.
Yeah, exactly.
He was something else.
Yeah, that was pretty much it. There was somebody else. Who else? Name some names, Carrie.
Matt Roper.
Didn't know.
He's my age. So you would have been with Hugh Nibley, Sidney Sperry. He might have been retired when you were there.
I think it was retired by then.
Richard Anderson.
Well, Richard, yeah.
David.
No, I knew Davis, but not that well. Richard and I would talk. I had to copy these letters, the Trauberg letters that were written talking about the Smiths making money, and it had information about money digging and stuff in there. And I asked Richard about them. I said, why didn't you include this in your book on the three witnesses or stuff like that? And he never answered me. I didn't get a response at all.
Really?
Yeah.
That's Dan Peterson's favorite book, Anderson's book on the witnesses.
There's a lot.
He thinks that's the fifth book of scripture.
Oh, God. He left out so much. I found so many contradictory things with that book, information that I found doing my own research. I says, why didn't you include this? Because when I wrote what I wrote, I let the evidence take me where it goes. I don't have, when I start to write something, I have an idea, I have a thesis, but I don't necessarily let that drive my writing. I let the evidence take me where it's going to take me.
Right.
And a lot of them have an agenda. When I write it, I don't have an agenda. I just write where it takes me. And
you sound like one of my heroes, Dan Vogel.
Yeah.
He's
like,
here now.
When I was doing research on
okay, I found this on the web for He's Here Like.
What?
Sorry, that was Siri. Where that came from. Holy cow.
I was looking for the articles about Alvin's body in the Reflector.
Uh-huh.
Who was it that compiled all the stuff from the newspapers before Dan's book? Some Mormon,
Francis.
Not Nyman.
Not Monty Nyman?
No.
Robert Millett.
No, this is before them.
Oh,
This is
Kirkham?
This is before Dan's book came out on early Mormon documents. This was like the source to go to for early Mormon documents. Kirkham? Might have been Kirkham.
Francis Kirkham.
Might have been Francis Kirkham. And
a whole bunch of improvement era articles.
Okay, he did some books though about early Mormon newspaper accounts and stuff.
Yes, that was him, Francis Kirkham.
Okay, and he claimed in there that the thing about Alvin was published in 4 issues of the Reflector. And I went and I read every single issue, and he's only in 3. They missed 1 week. Oh. Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but if I remember right, it's only in 3 issues, not 4 for that month.
Interesting.
And there were some other things I found that he missed, that he got incorrect. And I would check his typescript with the actual articles. Yeah.
And he didn't like you doing that, huh?
I don't think he was around then. I did that for the Book of Mormon project.
Another one who had problems with Richard Lloyd Anderson is this guy.
I met Grant a few times at the U of U and BYU. Yeah, I liked Grant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Patty Cake says Sherry Dew is trying to cut in.
What Sherry's?
I love her. She's a hoot. Patty Cake, not Sherry
Patty
Dew.
Cake, you're funny.
I love Patty Cake. She's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hey, we have been about an hour and 35 minutes, and the audio is just clobbering us at this point in time. Do you have anything you want to say? Shall we say, give us a closing statement on your faith and testimony. Oh.
There is no God.
Oh.
Well, wait, let me put it to you this way. Okay. The God that you believe in, I don't believe in.
That's what Flat Pat would say too. Yeah. And he's
the church
here.
is
My atheist friend.
the church isn't true. Nothing is true. I don't know anything. I contain a lot of knowledge, but I don't know anything. If you want to know what life's all about and where I got my hero's journey from, okay, I gotta get my books.
Oh, there you go. The Duke.
Oh, where's my?
He's getting something.
Oh, I have it here too. I didn't know that.
Patty Cake says there is a Santa, Tim.
Of course there is. If you want to know what life is all about,
Yes.
you need to watch and read The Power of Myth.
Oh, yeah.
You need to read this and understand it.
Very good recommendation.
You need to read this.
Yeah, The Hero with 1,000 Faces.
And you need to read this. The Spirit of
Shop.
Shamanism by Roger Walsh.
Wow.
Roger Walsh was Sherry Lamb Chop Sherry's husband, and Tarcher Books was his press. This book helped me out more than anything else. He adds a dimension to Campbell in the hero's journey that you understand. And for the women, it's Woman Who Run with the Wolves is a good book also.
It is. Very
Yeah.
good. Yep.
So, and the biggest mystery of life is to know you don't know anything.
You're like
You know?
Socrates. And he was the wisest.
Yeah,
Wisest, not most knowledgeable.
that's right.
Big difference. Zohar talks about that difference. I was reading that earlier today. So, anyway, okay. Well, thank you so much for that excellent recommendation. We will have to get together again when we can get this audio straightened out and talk a little bit more about Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey. That would be fun to do.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys, we're going to head out now. Remember, next Sunday, Dan Vogel, 6 p.m. And I will catch up with you as I can. Have a good night. We're going to close out. The audio is horrible. Love y'all. We'll see you. What? Oh, you're waving.
Well,
by.
wait,
Right.
no. Tom Miller says, don't out Gary or they'll revoke his salvation too. Okay, do you guys know about that Gary keeps 2 books?
No.
I'm outing Gary Bergera. He keeps 2 sets of books. One he shows to Smith, to George, and one he keeps to himself. That's the truth. I got it from the horse's mouth.
You outed Gary Bergera on my
Just
show.
now.
I'll have Gary come on and defend himself.
Okay.
All right, you guys. See
Welcome,
you
guys.
next week.